The Design of Everyday Things, by Don Norman. Introduction. Have you ever walked up to a glass door and pushed, only to find it doesn't budge? You feel a little foolish. So you pull. Still nothing. You push on the other side. You pull again, a little harder this time. Just as you're about to give up and question your own strength, someone walks up from the other side and the door slides open. We've all been there. That little moment of confusion, that flash of feeling stupid. It's a feeling we get when we can't figure out a new remote control, or when we turn on the wrong burner on the stove, or when we accidentally delete a file we were trying to save. In those moments, we almost always blame ourselves. We think, ugh, I'm so bad with technology, or how could I be so clumsy? But what if I told you it's not your fault? What if that feeling of frustration wasn't a sign of your failure, but a sign of the object's failure? This is the revolutionary idea at the heart of one of the most important books ever written on how we interact with the world, The Design of Everyday Things. The author, Don Norman, is a brilliant cognitive scientist, a man who studies how our minds work. But he became a legend not for studying the complexities of the brain in a lab, but for looking at the simple, frustrating objects we use every single day. He looked at those confusing doors, those baffling faucets, and those infuriating gadgets, and he asked a simple question: why are they so hard to use? This book became an instant classic, a Bible for designers, engineers, and creators at companies like Apple, Google, and Pixar. It has sold millions of copies and has fundamentally changed the way we build and think about our world. And today, I'm going to share its deepest secrets with you. By the end of our time together, I promise you this: you will never look at a door, a stove, or your own phone the same way again. You'll start to see the hidden language of the objects all around you. You'll understand why some things feel intuitive and joyful, while others make you want to throw them against a wall. More than that, you'll stop blaming yourself and start seeing the world through the eyes of a designer. You'll gain a kind of superpower, the ability to see the invisible forces that shape our daily lives. So, let's begin our journey into the mind of a master observer, and uncover the secrets hidden in the design of our everyday things. Book summary. It all starts with a simple observation, one that Don Norman became so famous for that they named the problem after him. They're called Norman doors. A Norman door is any door that is confusing to use. It's a door where the design tells you to do one thing, when you should be doing the opposite. Imagine a heavy glass door with a big horizontal bar handle. The handle practically screams, "Pull me." That shape, that affordance, is perfectly designed for your hand to grab and pull. But when you do, it's locked. You pull harder. Nothing. Then someone on the other side gives it a gentle push and walks right through. The handle told you to pull, but the door needed to be pushed. That, right there, is the essence of bad design. It's a door that makes you feel dumb, when the fault lies entirely with its creator. Norman realized that our world is filled with these little moments of friction, these Norman doors of all shapes and sizes. And he noticed that when we encounter them, our first instinct is to blame ourselves. We think the problem is with us. But Norman's great insight was to flip that script entirely. He declared, "It is the duty of the machine, the object, the system, to understand people. It is not our duty to understand the arbitrary, nonsensical mind of the machine." This simple shift in perspective is the foundation of everything that follows. It's an act of empathy. Good design isn't about aesthetics or making things look pretty, though that can be a part of it. At its core, good design is an act of communication between the designer and the user, a silent conversation conducted through the object itself. And for that conversation to work, the designer must understand how our minds work. Two of the most important characteristics of good design, Norman says, are discoverability and understanding. Discoverability is the question. Can I even figure out what I can do with this thing? When you see a button, you know you can push it. When you see a handle, you know you can grab it. You've discovered the possible actions. Understanding is the next step. Okay, I know I can push this button. But what will it do? What does it all mean? When both of these are clear, the object feels intuitive. When they are not, we get confused and frustrated. To achieve this clarity, Norman introduces a toolkit of 5 fundamental concepts, 5 secret clues that good designers use to guide us. Once you learn to see them, you'll see them everywhere. The first, and perhaps most famous, is affordances. An affordance is the relationship between an object and a person that determines what actions are possible. It's not a property of the object itself, it's a relationship. A chair, for example, affords sitting, but only for a creature of a certain size and shape. A tiny dollhouse chair doesn't afford sitting for you, even though it's still a chair. A flat, sturdy rock might afford sitting, even though it wasn't designed for it. Affordances are all the things an object makes possible for you. A knob affords turning. A slot affords inserting something. Glass affords seeing through, but it also has an anti-affordance. It prevents you from walking through it. Now, this is where it gets interesting. An affordance exists whether you can see it or not. That glass door still blocks you even if it's perfectly clean and invisible. This is why birds fly into windows. The anti-affordance of blocking them is real, but it's not perceivable. And that brings us to the second, even more important concept, signifiers. If an affordance is what you can do, a signifier is the clue that tells you how to do it. Norman says signifiers are actually far more important to a designer than affordances. That big, pullable handle on the push door? That was a signifier, and it was a lying one. The simple word push taped to the door is also a signifier. It's a clue that communicates the right action. Good design uses signifiers naturally. A flat plate on a door signifies pushing. A small handle signifies pulling with just your fingertips. A big round doorknob signifies grasping and turning. Bad design either has no signifiers, or it has misleading ones. Norman tells a story about a sink in a London hotel. He washed his hands and then couldn't figure out how to drain the water. There was no lever, no knob, no button. He searched everywhere. He even tried to pry the stopper open with a spoon. Finally, defeated, he had to go down to the front desk and ask. The answer? Push down on the stopper. The sink stopper itself was the control, but there was absolutely no signifier to communicate this. Worse, it required him to put his clean hands back into dirty water to use it. It was a failure on multiple levels. The third tool in our kit is mapping. Mapping is the relationship between a control and its effect. The best mappings are what Norman calls natural mappings, where the connection is intuitive and immediate. Think about your car. To turn right, you turn the steering wheel to the right. The top of the wheel moves in the same direction as the car. That's a good, natural mapping. But what about your stove? Most stoves have 4 burners in a square, but the controls are in a straight line. So, which knob controls the front right burner? Is it the first one? The second one? The one on the far right? There's no natural relationship. The layout of the controls doesn't match the layout of the burners. As a result, even after using the same stove for years, we still make mistakes. We turn on the wrong burner, or we have to bend down and read the tiny faded diagrams next to the knobs. That's a mapping problem. What would good mapping look like? Imagine if the 4 knobs were arranged in the same square pattern as the burners. You'd never make a mistake again. The relationship would be instantly clear. No instructions, no diagrams, no memory required. The knowledge would be in the world, not trapped in your head. A fantastic example of good mapping is the seat adjustment control in some cars. The control is a tiny little model of the seat itself. Want to move the seat back forward? You push the back of the little model forward. Want to raise the front of the seat? You lift the front of the little model. It's brilliant because it's perfectly intuitive. The fourth concept is feedback. Feedback is about communicating the result of an action. It's the click you hear when you plug in a cable, the light that comes on when you press a power button, or the little whirring sound your computer makes to tell you it's working. Feedback answers the question, did it work? And it has to be immediate. Ever press an elevator button and, when nothing happens for a second, you press it again and again? That's because of a lack of immediate feedback. You don't know if the system received your request. A well-designed elevator button lights up the instant you press it, reassuring you, I heard you. Help is on the way. But feedback can also be too much or too little. A single, mysterious beep from an appliance that doesn't tell you what happened is poor feedback. A device that beeps incessantly can be so annoying that we learn to ignore it, or we disable it, which can be dangerous. Good feedback is immediate, informative, and appropriate. It tells you what happened, and it does so in a calm, respectful way. Finally, the fifth and perhaps most powerful tool is the conceptual model. A conceptual model is the simplified explanation in your mind of how something works. It doesn't have to be perfectly accurate, but it has to be useful. For example, on your computer, you have files and folders. You can drag a file and drop it into a folder. Your conceptual model is that of a physical office, with paper documents and manila folders. In reality, there are no folders inside your computer. The data is stored in complex ways on a hard drive. But the folder metaphor is a brilliant conceptual model because it helps you understand how to use the system. When a design gives you a good conceptual model, you feel in control. You can predict what will happen when you perform an action. When it gives you a bad one, you're lost. Norman tells a fantastic story about his old refrigerator. It had 2 compartments, the freezer and the fresh food section, and 2 controls, one labeled freezer and the other refrigerator. Simple enough, right? The conceptual model is obvious. One knob controls the freezer temperature, the other controls the fridge temperature. But no matter what he did, he could never get the temperatures right. If the fridge was too warm, he'd turn its dial to colder, but then the freezer would get too cold and the lettuce would freeze. The problem was that the conceptual model suggested by the controls was completely false. In reality, the refrigerator only had one cooling mechanism. One knob controlled how cold the whole system got, and the other knob controlled how much of that cold air was sent to the freezer versus the fresh food section. The 2 controls were completely interdependent. Without the correct conceptual model, trying to adjust the temperature was an exercise in pure frustration. The design lied to him. So, we have these 5 powerful tools: affordances, signifiers, mapping, feedback, and conceptual models. Together, they form the basis of understandable and usable design. But to truly understand why things go wrong, we have to look deeper into the psychology of how we, as humans, actually perform actions. Norman introduces 2 powerful ideas here: the gulfs of execution and evaluation, and the 7 stages of action. Imagine you're facing a new device. There are 2 gulfs you have to cross. The first is the gulf of execution. This is the gap between what you want to do, your goal, and what the system allows you to do. It's the moment you ask, how do I work this thing? What can I even do? A well-designed product builds a bridge across this gulf with clear signifiers, good mapping, and constraints that guide you to the right actions. The second is the gulf of evaluation. This is the gap between the state of the system and your ability to understand it. It's where you ask, what just happened? Is this what I wanted? This gulf is bridged by clear feedback and a good conceptual model that helps you interpret what you're seeing. When both gulfs are wide, you feel lost and helpless. When they are narrow, you feel in control and empowered. The designer's job is to be a bridge builder. To understand how to build those bridges, Norman breaks down any action into 7 stages. Now, this might sound a bit academic, but it's actually a beautiful way to understand the journey from thought to action. Most of this happens subconsciously, but when we get stuck, it's because one of these stages has failed. Let's walk through it with a simple goal. I want to read my book, but it's getting dark. 1. The goal. First, you form a goal. Get more light. 2. Plan. Next, you plan. You could open the curtains, move to a different chair, or turn on a lamp. You decide, turn on the lamp. 3. Specify. Now you have to specify the action sequence. Reach for the switch on the lamp. 4. Perform. Finally, you perform the action. You physically move your hand and flip the switch. That's the execution side. Now comes the evaluation side. 5. Perceive. You perceive the state of the world. You see the light come on. 6. Interpret. You interpret that perception. The lamp is now on. 7. Compare, and you compare the outcome with your original goal. Yes, I have more light. I can read my book now. Every action we take, big or small, follows this cycle. When a design fails, it's because it has failed us at one of these stages. A light switch with no clear mapping fails at the specify stage. A button with no feedback fails at the perceive stage. A refrigerator with a false conceptual model fails at the interpret stage. By asking questions at each of the 7 stages, a designer can pinpoint exactly where a product is failing its user. This brings us to one of the most compassionate and important ideas in the book, the nature of human error. We've established that bad design is the culprit for most of our frustrations. But we still make mistakes. Why? Norman makes a crucial distinction between 2 types of errors: slips and mistakes. A slip is when you intend to do the right thing, but you mess up the execution. It's an error of action, and it usually happens subconsciously, especially when we're skilled at something and not paying close attention. For example, you mean to put the milk back in the fridge, but you're distracted and you accidentally put it in the cupboard. Your goal was correct, but your action was flawed. That's a slip. A mistake, on the other hand, is an error of intention. It's when you form the wrong goal or the wrong plan from the very beginning. Even if you execute your plan perfectly, you're still doing the wrong thing. Let's go back to the refrigerator example. If you think the refrigerator knob directly controls its temperature, and you keep turning it up hoping to make it colder, you're making a mistake. You are perfectly executing a flawed plan. Mistakes are born from a bad conceptual model or a misinterpretation of the situation. Why does this distinction matter? Because the solutions are completely different. To prevent slips, you need better design that provides good feedback, clear constraints, and reduces the chance of doing the wrong action. The ATM that forces you to take your card back before it gives you cash is a design that prevents a common memory lapse slip. To prevent mistakes, you need a better conceptual model. You need the system to help you understand the situation correctly so you can form the right goal in the first place. You need better guidance, better help, not just better buttons. And even then, Norman argues, we need to reframe the whole idea of error. In a conversation between 2 people, if one person says something confusing, the other doesn't flash an error 404 message. They ask for clarification. They work together to reach understanding. Why can't our interaction with machines be more like a collaboration? Instead of punishing us for errors, our devices should guide us toward the correct action. An error isn't a failure, it's an opportunity for the design to be more helpful. This is why the famous undo command is one of the most powerful and humane inventions in modern computing. It acknowledges that slips will happen, and it provides a safety net. It forgives us. It treats us like a human, not a machine. But what happens when design is taken out of the ideal world of principles and put into the messy reality of business? This is where things get really challenging. In the real world, design isn't just about the user. It's about competition, costs, and deadlines. Norman identifies a disease that infects almost every successful product. He calls it featureitis, and its main symptom is creeping featureism. It works like this. A company releases a simple, elegant product that does one thing really well. People love it. It's a success. But then, the pressure begins. The competition adds a new feature, so you have to add it too, plus one more to stay ahead. Existing customers start asking for more options. The marketing team wants new features to talk about for the next product launch. And slowly, year after year, the simple, elegant product becomes a bloated, complicated mess. More buttons, more menus, more modes, more confusion. Norman uses a wonderful example: the simple Lego motorcycle from the first edition of his book. Originally, it had just 15 pieces. It was so cleverly designed that you could put it together without any instructions. The physical, cultural, and logical constraints of the pieces guided you to the one and only correct assembly. But when he went to write the revised edition, he found the new version of that same Lego motorcycle. It now had 29 pieces. He, Don Norman himself, needed the instruction manual to build it. Featureitis had struck. The cure for featureitis, he suggests, is courage. It's the courage to resist the pressure to match the competition feature for feature. It's the courage to focus on what makes your product truly great, and to be good enough in other areas. It's the courage to say no to more, in favor of better. This requires a deep, customer-obsessed philosophy, one that ignores the noise of the market and focuses relentlessly on solving the real needs of people. In the end, this is what design thinking is all about. It's not a rigid process, but a mindset. It begins by refusing to solve the problem you're given. Instead, you start by diverging, exploring, questioning, observing, to find the real problem. This is the first diamond of his famous double diamond model of design: diverge to find the right problem, then converge on a clear problem statement. Only then do you move to the second diamond, solving the problem. And again, you diverge. You brainstorm, you generate countless ideas, you build rough prototypes, you test them, and you're not afraid to fail. You fail often and you fail fast, because every failure is a learning experience. Finally, after all that exploration, you converge on a solution that is not just elegant, but that truly serves human needs. It's an iterative, sometimes messy process, but it's rooted in a profound respect for the person who will ultimately use the product. It's a process that balances the constraints of business with the needs of humanity. And it's a process that reminds us that the most successful, most beloved products aren't just tools. They are companions in our daily lives. They respect our intelligence, forgive our slips, and quietly, elegantly, help us achieve our goals. They make our lives just a little bit better, a little bit easier, and a little bit more joyful. And that, Don Norman shows us, is the true purpose of design. Commentary. When you finish a book like The Design of Everyday Things, the world looks different. It's as if someone has handed you a new pair of glasses, and suddenly, you can see the hidden code that runs our world. The frustration you used to feel at that confusing door is replaced by a sense of curiosity. You don't get angry at the stove anymore. You look at the layout of its knobs and you think, ah, A mapping problem. The most powerful lesson, for me, isn't just about design, it's about empathy. The book's central message is a profound act of forgiveness. It tells us that when we struggle with the tools of our world, the problem isn't with us, it's with the tools. This simple idea lifts a huge psychological burden. It frees us from self-blame and empowers us to become observers and critics of the world around us, rather than passive victims of it. In today's world, this message is more important than ever. We are surrounded by technology that is incredibly powerful but often deeply confusing. We carry supercomputers in our pockets, but sometimes we can't even figure out how to silence a notification. We're told that technology is making us smarter, but so often it just makes us feel incompetent. Don Norman's work reminds us that it doesn't have to be this way. Technology should serve us, not the other way around. It should be designed with a deep understanding and respect for our human nature, our creativity, our flexibility, and yes, even our tendency to make slips. So, how can you start applying these ideas in your own life, right now? Here are 3 simple actions you can take. First, for the next week, I want you to find one Norman door. It could be a real door, a confusing button on a website, or a poorly designed kitchen gadget. When you find it, don't just get frustrated. Stop for a moment and analyze it. Why is it confusing? Is it a lack of signifiers? Is the mapping unnatural? Is the feedback poor? By simply naming the problem, you transform your frustration into an act of intelligent observation. Second, redesign something small. Take the most annoying remote control in your house. Grab a piece of paper and sketch out a better version. What would you eliminate? How would you group the buttons to create a natural mapping? You don't have to build it. The simple act of thinking through a better solution will sharpen your design eye and make you more aware of the choices, good and bad, that designers make. And third, try to explain a conceptual model. The next time you use a device you know well, try to explain to a friend how you think it works. What's your mental story for how the microwave heats your food, or how your playlist shuffles songs? Articulating your conceptual model helps you realize how much we rely on these mental stories, and it highlights how critical it is for designers to provide us with good ones. That was a summary of The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. We've walked through the key ideas today, but I have to be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a travel brochure. It can show you the beautiful sights, but it can never replace the experience of actually taking the journey yourself. The real magic of this book happens in the quiet moments of reading, when a particular story or a simple phrase connects with your own experiences and a light bulb goes on in your mind. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about today has resonated with you, I wholeheartedly encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning principles, it's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see the world and your place in it. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to like this summary and subscribe to the channel. It's a small click for you, but it makes a huge difference, ensuring that you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.